Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Jeffrey, and this is AutoAlchemy, the intersection between typology and self-growth. And today I'm back at it again with another episode where I answer Google's questions about ENTPs. Let's jump into it. Okay, so before we get started, I just wanted to make a comment about why I find this so interesting and perplexing. It's very fascinating to me that, gosh, I don't know how long it's been since I did my last Google video, but it's been a while, maybe even close to a year. And so to me, it's very fascinating to look to Google as sort of this embodiment of various shifts in the collective unconscious. It makes me wonder things like, do people have particular questions about ENTPs at different times of the year? Do people see a particularly bad example of an ENTP in popular culture somewhere, and then that example informs the way that they think about ENTPs, and then they go to Google and they seek validation for their questions? Anyway, enough of that particular ENTP rant. Let's dive into the questions. Are ENTPs manipulative? I definitely think that we have the capacity to be manipulative, otherwise I would not have made a video on ENTP duplicity. At the same time, I am somebody who is a bit cynical about humanity and think that it doesn't take much for our darkest impulses to override us. So I think that most people are manipulative at some level. Most people are doing particular things, maybe with an unintentional expectation that they will get some kind of reaction in turn. We live in cultures, we live in societies. Oh God, that's so cringy. But we live with other people, and we develop certain narratives about what kinds of actions produce what kinds of outcomes, and these things all get in the way of us interfacing with each other honestly and seeing other people as they are. So the point of that is that I do think that people in general have this capacity to be manipulative, and I would say that ENTPs perhaps are more inclined to be consciously manipulative. The reason for that being that we do have stronger extroverted feeling than other thinking types. So we will see the entire spectrum of how people feel, and that will be part of our set of playing cards. So you can choose to use that knowledge for good or for ill. You might use those very same skills to be more diplomatic, to actively try to build bridges in solving problems in the world. Are ENTPs mean? So ENTPs definitely have a reputation for being mean, and I think that this can be summed up by the prevalent meme, facts don't care about your feelings. I think that particular worldview and that particular pattern is something that ENTPs gravitate towards. It's a mindset that they find intrinsically appealing, a mindset that is compatible with the way that we naturally navigate the world. However, I do caution any ENTPs who are watching against going too far down that particular rabbit hole. And the reason that I caution against it is that as organisms in the world, we are constantly seeking a sense of equilibrium, and you can only ignore the realm of values and of genuine human relation for so long. You actually need to incorporate that stuff into your map if you want your logic to be effective. So in my mind, the antidote to this particular mentality is that feelings are a fact. Feelings are a reality that human beings have to deal with. It doesn't mean that you have to cave in to some feeling to give it exactly what it demands, but you have to be able to hear it. You have to be able to acknowledge it and meet it halfway. Feelings, whether they are existing within yourself or within other people, are part of the landscape that we live in. They are part of the problem space, no matter what problem you're working on. And this means, to get back to the previous question, that we have to convert those potentially manipulative skills into diplomatic skills so that our logic is actually heard, so that we don't alienate people before they've even been able to process what we're saying. Are ENTPs emotional? So I think the key to understanding this question is different levels of resolution. So if you are examining an ENTP and looking at their day-to-day life, you probably won't see a ton of emotional outpouring. Now, there is another side to that coin, because if you zoom out a little bit and you look at the ENTP at a yearly level or even a decade to decade level, then you might see a different story. I remember being in college, and this was my final year. I was about to graduate. I was going to go on to the next uncertain chapter of my life, and I was spending some time with my friend group. And up until that point, I hadn't really felt any kind of way about leaving, except maybe some anxiety. And then suddenly, as I'm watching one of my friends who is cutting my other friend's hair, I'm suddenly overwhelmed with emotion. I realize I love these people and that I'm not going to see them again, potentially. I mean, clearly you can make things work in the future, but I was kind of catastrophizing. I thought I'm not going to survive whatever comes next in my life, that I will never see these people again. I'm going to lose this support system that was never apparently valuable to me until this particular moment. So what I'm saying is, I started bawling. Okay, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. It felt like I was experiencing all of the emotion that I had been neglecting for the entire year. It was all crashing over me. You know, I had been in a major breakup earlier that year. So many things had gone wrong in my life in this particular year, and I just didn't really allow myself to metabolize it, and suddenly everything came crashing over me. So one important Jungian idea is that the things that you ignore, the things that you repress, will eventually find a way to express themselves. And so if you are consistently avoiding the realm of emotion, then when it does hit you, it's going to be really bad. And I'm kind of scared because I know there are going to be people out there who are saying, well, you know, I've never had like an intense emotional experience in the past 15 years of my life, so I don't think this is true. So I feel pretty bad for you, because once year 20 rolls along, you're in big trouble. You're in big trouble, buddy. Are ENTPs introverted? Okay, so at first glance, this question is a little bit comical. You know, you've got the E in ENTP, which stands for extroversion, so how can you wonder if ENTPs are introverted? However, things are always a little more complicated than you want to think. There are certainly different notions of introversion versus extroversion. So one thing that I learned from Harry over at Cognitive Personality Theory is this idea that our notion of thinking about extroversion is so warped by the fact that we inhabit this social media landscape where you get this perfectly curated version of what everyone's lives look like. And so when we think of extroversion, we are thinking of the most exaggerated, partying, orgy on the cruise ship kind of life. And clearly most people are not living that way. So compared to the portrait of excess that we all look at, many people feel like an introvert, even if cognitively speaking, they are oriented in a more outward fashion. Which brings me to Jung's original definitions of introversion versus extroversion. It wasn't this idea of, do you get your energy by being alone? Do you get your energy by spending time with other people? That was sort of a warped, highly caricatured version of what he was saying. Originally, introversion and extroversion were just about subject versus object. I sometimes lose sight of what's happening to myself as an internal subject because I get so caught up in all these different projects that I'm working on and the possibilities that they represent. So the point there is that these notions are very complicated. I think that if you're looking purely energetically, I might read as more of an introvert, or at the very least an ambiverted ENTP, even though my primary cognitive function is wired to be external. I don't have to be spending time with other people to get that sort of absorption with some sort of outward process. Are ENTPs annoying? Well, if you've watched this video this far, then you already have your answer. Seriously though, I do think there's something potentially annoying about the combination of extroverted intuition and extroverted feeling. I myself am a pretty creative person, and a lot of my creativity is fueled by this notion that I get to share my creativity with other people. I get to see what sort of emotional impact I am creating. So yeah, early on in my life, there was a lot of frantic pinging that I would do with people. And I think that can come off as being a little bit annoying. Are ENTPs alpha? Okay, so I don't really like this question for a number of reasons. I think there's a lot of ambiguity in what is meant by alpha. Do you mean somebody who is picking up all the babes because that is an obvious yes and you don't even need to ask it, so why are you wasting my time? Google. So if we're going to use the term alpha, then I think that it's most helpfully defined as somebody who is taking responsibility across as many domains of life as possible, somebody who is trying to maximize their potential and take ownership of all of the different cognitive functions. And so if that's the definition that we're using, then clearly ENTPs are not alpha, because no type is going to be inherently alpha. Every type will have their built-in preferences, and those preferences will therefore close them off from the fullness of human expression. Fun fact, your type is merely a starting point. It's the raft that will carry you across the river of the early parts of your life. But the question is, what do you do with your life once you end up on the other side of the riverbank? To paraphrase Jung himself, to identify with a type is to identify with a corpse. And what he meant by that is that our typology preferences are adaptive. And if we don't allow ourselves to continue to adapt over the course of a lifespan, then we're not really growing. We might as well be dead organisms. We are adapted to a landscape that is no longer present. To some degree, you may always exhibit certain preferences, but the goal is to stretch yourself in both directions as much as possible, and also to cultivate the wisdom to know, when do I call upon my introverted thinking? When do I call upon my extroverted feeling? And how do I bring these both together? Thank you guys so much for commenting, liking, subscribing. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll talk to you guys next time. Adios.